In the spring of 2022, a lab technician named Rachel Fortis was doing something completely unremarkable. She was parking her car for free near Ithaca, New York, then walking through a cemetery on her way to work at Cornell University. She'd made this walk dozens of times. But on this particular morning, she noticed something odd. The ground was moving, not shifting, not crumbling, moving, with thousands of small dark shapes lifting off the grass and the bare patches of soil, hovering, circling, disappearing back into tiny holes in the earth. She caught a few in a jar and brought them to her supervisor, an entomology professor named Brian Danforth. What happened next turned into one of the strangest discoveries in modern insect ecology. And it reveals an entire civilization that has been living beneath our feet, in places we walk past every single day, completely unnoticed. The bees Fortis found are called Andrena regularis. Common name, the regular mining bee. If you picture a bee, you're probably picturing the wrong kind. Most people imagine a honeybee golden, fuzzy, living in a hive with tens of thousands of sisters, a queen, and a tightly organized society. Andrena regularis is nothing like that. It is a solitary species. Each female bee digs her own burrow, lays her own eggs, gathers her own pollen, and lives almost her entire life completely alone underground. And yet, in this one cemetery, there turned out to be millions of them. Danforth's team spent the following spring, 2023, doing something that sounds almost comically simple but required real scientific rigor, counting bees as they emerged from the ground. They placed small mesh emergence traps directly over patches of soil. Structures shaped like tiny tents that would catch any bee flying up out of a burrow without letting it escape. So researchers could record exactly how many came out of exactly how much ground. Then they did the math across the cemetery's full footprint. The number they calculated was almost unbelievable. An estimated 5.5 million individual bees, emerging from roughly a square mile's worth of plots, concentrated within an area of about 1.5 acres. To put that in perspective, that's more bees than there are people living in Manhattan, packed into a patch of land smaller than 2 city blocks. One researcher on the team, Steve Hoge, later said he was floored by the calculation. Previous published records of large ground nesting bee aggregations had topped out in the hundreds of thousands. This was an order of magnitude beyond almost anything documented before, anywhere in the world. So why was an entire hidden city of millions of bees living, undetected, in a cemetery in upstate New York for what researchers believe may be over 100 years? The answer comes down to something deceptively simple. The soil never got disturbed. Most ground nesting bees need exactly one thing humans are extremely good at destroying: undisturbed earth. A construction site, a plowed field, a regularly mowed and aerated lawn, a parking lot poured over what used to be open dirt. All of these erase ground nesting bee habitat almost instantly. Bees that dig burrows a few inches underground need that ground to simply stay put, season after season, year after year. So the same network of tunnels can be reused and expanded generation after generation. A cemetery, it turns out, is one of the only landscapes in a modern town that reliably offers this. Graves are dug once, and then the ground around them is left largely undisturbed for decades, sometimes for over a century. The grass gets mowed, sure, but the deep soil structure stays intact. No one tills a cemetery. No one builds a new foundation through it next year. It becomes, by complete accident, one of the most stable patches of earth left in an otherwise constantly rebuilt human landscape. Cemeteries across the world, researchers are now suggesting, may function as accidental refuges, quiet pockets of undisturbed ground sitting in the middle of cities and suburbs, doing ecological work nobody designed them to do. The dead, in a strange and almost poetic way, may be protecting the living. Now picture what's actually happening under the grass during a single warm week each spring. Each female bee, working entirely alone, digs a vertical tunnel several inches down, then branches off into individual side chambers. Into each chamber, she packs a ball of pollen and nectar she's gathered on previous flights, lays a single egg on top of it, then seals the chamber and moves on to dig the next one. There is no queen directing this, no division of labor, no communication between burrows. Each of those 5.5 million bees independently performs this entire process on her own dozens of times. An instinct passed down with no instruction manual and no oversight, executed perfectly anyway. The egg hatches into a larva still sealed inside that underground chamber. It eats the stored pollen ball. It grows, pupates, and transforms, all without ever seeing daylight, all without its mother present, all underground, all in darkness for most of the year. Then, when the soil warms past a certain threshold, researchers found activity surges once the ground passes about 20 degrees Celsius. Thousands of bees that have never met each other, that share a patch of dirt, but not a single point of contact, erupt out of the earth within days of each other, ready to fly, mate, and begin the entire cycle again. This isn't an isolated phenomenon, either. The researchers also documented something else living alongside this enormous population, a so-called cuckoo bee, a parasite species named Nomata imbricata, whose entire survival strategy depends on sneaking into Andrena regularis burrows and laying its own eggs there, letting another species do the work of feeding its young. An underground ecosystem with predators, parasites, density, and competition. None of it visible from the surface, all of it happening in soil most people would describe as completely empty. And these bees matter far beyond the cemetery's fence line. Andrena regularis is what's known as a pollinator species, among the very insects responsible for fertilizing the flowers of nearby apple orchards and other local crops. Solitary bees like this one are frequently overlooked in conversations about pollinator decline, since almost all public attention goes to honeybees and their visible, manageable hives. But by some estimates, wild solitary bees may be responsible for the majority of pollination in many ecosystems, quietly doing more agricultural work than the species everyone is taught to picture when they hear the word bee, which raises an uncomfortable question. If a population of 5.5 million bees, one of the largest aggregations on record, went completely undetected by science for over 100 years, sitting in a cemetery a few minutes from one of the most prominent entomology departments in the world, what else is living beneath our feet right now, in places we walk past every single day without a second glance? Danforth's team has since launched a public project, asking ordinary people anywhere in the world to report ground, nesting bee aggregations they happen to notice. A small patch of grass with dozens of little holes, a sudden cloud of insects rising from bare dirt on a warm afternoon. The implication is almost unsettling. The next hidden city of millions might not be in some untouched wilderness. It might be in a vacant lot 2 streets from your house, in a strip of unmowed grass behind a parking lot, in the undisturbed corner of a park nobody bothers to walk through. You don't need a rainforest to find something the size of a small nation that science has never counted. Sometimes you just need a free parking spot, a short walk, and a moment where you actually look down,